Welcome to the Which Was Better podcast, where we discuss and decide which was better, the book or the movie. I'm your host, Lisa, and this week is the week of repeats. Not only do we have a repeat author, but we also have a repeat guest host. I'm so excited to welcome back Dory from All the Feels podcast. Dory, thank you for coming back and joining me again. I'm so excited.
Yay! Anytime. I'm thrilled to be here talking about another Terry Wilson book. So excited.
I was going to say, tell the listeners what it is that we are covering this week.
This week, we are covering The Art of Us by Queen Terry Wilson.
That's right. Patron saint of this podcast, Terry Wilson.
Terry Wilson, yeah. We stan.
We love you. And I mean, it's we have more. She's got more. But Hallmark is done.
You know what? And we're going to read them all.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we are. That's what I'm saying. Patron saint of this podcast. We're just going to make it a thing.
A Terry Wilson fan cast.
Yes. And just do her collective works. We celebrate her entire catalog.
That's right.
I'll go through it. Yeah. So, yes, we are covering The Art of Us, which let me confess something to you.
I'm already cracking up.
Let me confess something to you. This past Christmas, when Hallmark put out their list of Christmas movies, and I did a little write-up on my blog about just first thoughts of their Christmas lineup. And I saw in there that in the lineup that Taylor Cole and Steve Lund were doing a movie together. And I was like, brilliant. Why haven't we had this pairing before? And I'm like, that posted. And then Rachel from the Hallmarkies sent me a tweet and she was like, we have had this pairing. It was The Art of Us. And I was like, oh my God, we did. Mm-hmm. That's how much I forgot about this movie.
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and say spoiler. That's my overall feelings. It was because I watched this when it first came out and I had zero remembrance of it.
I also love that Rachel was the one who was like, actually, historian, the Hallmark historian, Rachel.
She was like, Lisa, come on now. And I was like, well, I think I replied to her. I was like, that's how much of an impact that movie made on me, considering I totally forgot about that.
Right.
Because I remember watching this, but I don't think I finished it then.
I mean, I remembered this movie, and I did not remember any real positive feelings about it.
Yeah.
But there have been times in my life where I have not enjoyed a Hallmark movie and then revisited it a year, 2, 3 later and been like, oh, I actually like this. Like, I think this is cute.
Yeah.
I guess you'll have to wait and see if that was my experience with this one. But I think you guys can guess how I probably felt.
So for both of us, I'm guessing that we had the same experience. We watched the movie, forgot about it, read the book, then watched the movie again.
Exactly.
So before we dig into both of them, because I want to kind of talk about them separately at first and then dig into the differences here. But I do want to do a quick summary for the listeners that have not read or seen the movie. The book is The Art of Us, and it was written by Terry Wilson and was released in 2016, which was not that long ago when you think about it. Although I also think that 1990 was like 10 years ago. I'm like, that was like 10 years ago, but
I know I'm fully not the one. Like, I still think the 80s was 20 years ago,
Thank you. Yeah. My kids were like, 1980 was like 30. And I'm like, why are you hurting me?
You're like, get out of my house.
Yeah. They're like, Mom, that was so long ago. And I'm like, why don't you just stab me in the heart? That would be quicker.
I know.
But
just go ahead.
Go ahead. Kids, man. So the book, okay, here's the summary of the book. Harper Higgins, art history professor and Vincent van Gogh scholar, doesn't need a man. She needs an artist, fast, The art show she's counting on to secure her tenure is in trouble. So when she collides with a ruggedly handsome man carrying a basket of violets on a rainy night in Boston, she thinks she's found her miracle. Cynical, brooding ex-soldier Tom Stone can paint, and he's quite good. He just needs Harper's artistic touch. But once she talks him into pretending he's a long-lost descendant of Van Gogh, the trouble really begins. As the art opening draws near, their identities, both real and imagined, hang in the balance. The student becomes the master as Tom teaches Harper that passion is its own work of art. I mean,
he sure does.
That last part.
That's correct.
There's a lot happening in that sentence.
There's plenty of passion to go around. Okay.
And student becomes the master. That there's a lot in those 4 words. There's a lot happening in those 4 words. So that's my cue to let the listeners know this is not going to be a Hallmark friendly discussion. So if that's not your jam, no hard feelings. We'll have another episode next couple weeks from now.
Yep.
So this is when I'm going to go ahead and say that on Twitter, I tweeted about this and I used okay, people don't at me. I know it's GIF. I'm going to say GIF until I die.
Yeah,
okay,
me too. Sounds better.
I don't say Jod. I say God. So, So, I'm going with the soft G. So I used a GIF of Hilary Duff waving herself, like fanning herself, because as I was reading this book, and I was like, yeah, this is it. And yeah, that was pretty much me. And Terry Wilson actually liked it. And I was like, does she know?
I know. Lisa texted me and she was like, Terry Wilson liked my tweet. Do you think she knows that we're talking about her? And I was like, she must sense it. Like her spidey senses must have been tingling and she knew that we were talking about one of her
they're
books.
Reading one of my books. I know.
Exactly.
I know. Listen.
She knew.
She really did. And then our friend Bowerfett, Brian, he replied and he said, sounds like you need a picture of iced tea.
Amen.
And listen, that inadvertently created my new heat levels. Now it's like, how many glasses of iced tea do I need to get through this scene?
I love that.
Yes. And so there was a couple of 3, maybe even 4 glassers.
Oh, for sure.
In this book. So I'm very excited about that. Okay.
Me too.
So shout out to Brian for inadvertently creating that for me. I'm just going to use that forever now. So the movie was it came out in May of 2017. I don't think it was associated with any of their branded seasonal. I think it was just a one-off, which I found funny because it came out in May and yet it was freezing. It was in Boston and everybody was wearing coats and
right. It was freezing. It was rainy, and there are a couple scenes where they're like in the town square or whatever, and it's like all lit up with lights. I was like, this looks like Christmas.
Yeah, it was such a not a dark movie, like dark as in tone, but just it felt very cold and like very blue,
gray.
And, yeah, and it was kind of odd to have it, in May, but whatever. It happened. It was just a one-off. So the summary, it stars Taylor Cole as Harper Higgins and Steve Lund as Tom Becker. Why they changed the name, I don't know, but they did. And here is what Hallmark threw at us for the summary, which Harper Higgins is determined to land a tenured position at Boston Art College, and she's counting on curating a big art gallery at the university to do so. But when she loses her showcased artist and can find no one else, she turns to her recently hired dog walker, who unbeknownst to anyone is a skilled painter.
Hallmark, as usual, doing the absolute least with their
like say what you see. We see a woman trying to get a job at a university and needs a painter. Done. That's it.
Give
That's
me
all we
two
get.
sentences of the absolute least you can say about these movies.
I feel like this is foreshadowing the difference between the two.
Yeah,
If I'm
for
going to be
sure.
honest,
Mhm.
because here's what I want to talk about before we really dig into the differences and how we feel about them. But, I don't want to disparage anybody because making movies is hard work. People put in, time and effort and, they're doing their jobs and they
Mhm.
take books and they make them into movies. And I understand they're two very different mediums. So you have to strip and you have to do all that. You have to condense parts and you have to rework parts and whatnot. However, I think that Hallmark goes overboard in removing parts of Terry Wilson's books. It's not just the sex, because of course they're not going to show sex on Hallmark, and we understand that. That's just a given. But I truly believe that they strip out way more than they need to in
Yep.
order to make her books into movies.
Yep.
And I don't think it works well.
I agree. And shocker, I agree.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say this, but I'm going to say it. I also feel like they dumb down her work in a way. And there is more emotional complexity in her stories than you would think if you just watched the movies based on her books. There is just a lot more feeling and a lot more complexity. And I understand that, like, it's really hard to convey, like, a lot of that in a movie, because in a book, you get to read the character's thoughts. And that is a great way to learn more about them. You can't do that in a movie. But I think that also at the same time, like, Hallmark viewers are smart enough to handle a bit of
Yeah.
of complexity and emotional intensity. Like, I think, speaking from our audiences that listen to our podcasts, like, it is a lot of smart, people who are here to, like, feel something, and you lose a lot of that in some of these movies based on Terry's books in particular.
Exactly. It's not that I don't enjoy them, because if I had never read a Terry Wilson book, I probably would like the movies just fine. This one, I'm going to go ahead and say it ahead of time. I remember it not being for me when it first came out. And
Mhm.
when I found out it was a Terry Wilson book, it surprised me.
Mhm.
And so, but I'd already read some of her stuff. And so I knew that I already knew there was going to be more there. I already knew it was going to be more layered
Mhm.
and we were going to have more. And the thing with Terry Wilson is, she writes stories in such a natural way. When it comes to romance, you have to take so much with a grain of salt, because there's all these contrived moments of, like, the meet cutes and the
Right.
constantly running into each other. And, oh, it just so happens that this job you want, either the person who's hiring you is somebody you're interested in or an enemy. It's all these things that you kind of have to just go with the flow. But, she makes it more than that, because it's all these perfect coincidences that, bring these people together, and then they inevitably fall in love. And not everyone can pull that off well.
Right.
But Terry does. Like, these circumstances that she plots out, for any other writer, would feel so forced. And you would be
Mhm.
like, this is just silly. It's just nonsense. Like, what are we doing here? But she makes it and she builds it and she layers it in such a way that it just seems like you're nodding your head along, like, yes, this is the only possible outcome. This is obviously where this needs
Right.
to go. And this is the only way these two can handle it. And you're in it. And
Right.
I don't think Hallmark, and I think part of the problem also is that this was the era of the Bill Abbott era. Sorry, y'all. I'm just going to go ahead and say it, the Bill Abbott era, where
Yeah.
we got a lot of very, very stripped down,
Yep.
very basic movies.
Very
And
basic. Yes.
yes, and they just took out so much of the passion and the just like you said, the complexity of
Yeah.
her work and her words, and it made me sad.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go ahead and say it. It made me sad.
So much is lost in
Yeah.
this movie. And it didn't have to be that way. And I think that's part of the frustration, right? It's not necessarily that they took things out, because, they're when you are adapting a book and making it a movie, you're always going to have to take things out. These are hour and a half movies, and sometimes you're working with like a 500-page book. Like, there's stuff is going to have to be left behind. But I feel like that makes it all the more important to keep the best, most interesting, most heartwarming moments from the book. And we lost a lot of that in this one.
Yeah,
You know?
we did. It just, I know we're giving away the ending here, but it just fell flat and it was just bland. And I did not like that for this book, because here's where I say I loved this book. I loved this book. And for anybody that hasn't read this book and is judging it based on the movie, please don't, because the book is well worth the read. It's the world that she builds in it is a lot richer. And I just, when I first saw the book and I first read the summary, not, kind of going back to when I was like, okay, we're going to do this one. It wasn't necessarily my wheelhouse in terms of the summary itself. I'm like, okay, she needs this art guy. But I was basing it on the parts that I remembered from the Hallmark movie, which wasn't fair.
Yeah.
And when I started reading into it, like actually reading the book, I'm like, hello.
Yeah.
This was so good.
I know.
So there were some little things, okay. So as far as the movie goes, there's some little things that they changed that they didn't have to. And I honestly don't understand why they did it. I'd love to grab the writer of the movie, Karen Berger, who, for Hallmark people out there, did All of My Heart, which is, got its own fandom, all those movies. She's done December Bride. She's done 6 or 7 movies for Hallmark. I would love to get her into a room with no microphones and be like, look, this is a trust tree. You can feel safe here. Tell me what your real first draft script looked like, because I guarantee it wasn't this. I guarantee
it was not this. No,
they stripped it out more. They were like, X here, and I could. Like,
there is no chance that her first draft resembled the movie. There's just no way. Because as a writer, reading another writer's work and like admiring it, I'm sure there's stuff that she was like, oh, I can't wait to put that in the script. I can't wait to put that in my movie. I can't wait to put that in my movie. And I completely agree with you. I think that, it got to the executive level and they were like, no, sorry.
Karen, reach out to us, which was better at podcast@gmail.com. I won't tell anybody. You can tell us the truth.
Tell us the truth. We believe you.
We'll just keep it between us. We can start a group chat.
Exactly.
So some of the things were, the name Tom Stone in the book is Tom Becker. I don't know why you need to change it, but they did. The dog Vincent, who was super cute in the movie, because all dogs are cute and they're awesome. But, as a dachshund owner for life, I've had 3 dachshunds in my life, and the book, I know the book dog is dachshund, and he's so stubborn, which that's exactly what dachshunds are. They are so stubborn. And maybe this was a dachshund mix. I don't know. But I was like, you could have kept it. But maybe they tried, and the dachshund was a pain, because they are. I love them, and I would die for dachshunds, but they're a pain, and they probably got one on set. They're like, never mind, bring in the backup, Vincent. This one won't stop barking.
Oh my! And he was supposed to have 1 ear.
That was totally forgot about that.
They could have
spent a little budget money and CGI'd out his ear, but whatever.
Right.
So, and then little things like, Lars the story, Harper, she's trying to go for this tenured position. She has 2 jobs. She works in the book, she works at a place called Art Bar, which is one of those wine and painting places where you get sauced and just paint. Sounds awesome. Yep. And in the movie, they make it a little bit more serious, like it's some sort of art collective where people go for art lessons, which they didn't need to change that. I thought that was part of it. Part of the story in the book is that she doesn't like that aspect. She doesn't qualify as teaching. She's like, I'm just babysitting drunk people while they play with paint. And
right.
She's like, this isn't my life. But they don't do that. They don't do that in the movie. They took that part away. And then, at the college where she's trying to get a position, her rival, I guess in the book, I thought they were the same age.
Yeah, me too. And I also expected them to actually be rivals.
Yeah.
In the movie, they're not rivals until he does some shady stuff at the end.
Right.
Like in the book, their relationship is contentious from jump. And it doesn't seem like that at all in the movie.
No, they make a line at the beginning of the movie where the boss, the director of the college, says something like, or somebody else in the office, I don't remember, honestly. Somebody says, I think Lars, that's his name, her rival. Lars is just irritated because you're younger than him and you're getting the teaching position. But that's the extent of it. We don't get the same amount of competitiveness that these two, because they are like, it's all very... smiling, but really like gritting teeth while they're smiling, like, putting up with each other.
They're at each other's throats, and like Lars questions and undermines everything she says all the time. And so a big part of the book is that he is like breathing down her neck.
Yes.
And a lot of the decisions and poor decisions that she makes in the book are in part because this guy is like coming for her, and that they have a real competition going. And you totally lose that in the movie. In the movie, like, I basically forget about him until he pops up at a couple pivotal times. And I'm like, wait a minute, what?
Yes. And we'll get to why, because they transfer all of that into another character that they brought in for the movie, which we'll get into that in just a minute, because that was wrong. But one of the other things that they didn't really need to change, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this, is, Tom moves to this place in Boston, and he moves to a houseboat. He's an ex-soldier, and he's been he was bought it because he just basically wanted to be alone. And in the book, he has his own dog, and his own dog is named Gunner. And you find out that they were they were active members of the military. They were active duty, and he was a search, and one of those people that goes into places with the dogs and searches, make sure there's no bombs, and says the place is clear. Like, and you learn a lot about his past and how it affects him, and he's just a loner, and he doesn't really have any friends except for the 2 people that run the marina where the boat is, and then the guy who's named Frank, who runs the flower shop, who he gets all his flowers from, and that's it. And I don't understand why they changed that to a random woman as the flower shop owner.
No, I didn't like that at all. And it seemed like what they did was they kind of combined Frank into the marina owner / flower shop guy.
Yeah.
But then added the girl who in the movie who runs the flower shop. And I didn't like it because I think Frank, you lose one of my favorite scenes in the book by making those characters, by taking those characters and kind of combining them, Frank and the marina owner. You lose like probably my favorite scene in the book because of that. And I also feel like there was less emphasis on him being a veteran in the movie, whereas in the book, like, that's a really big part of his identity and explains a lot of what's going on with him. And he has that kind of, he can confide in, well, he doesn't even have to confide in Frank. Like Frank just knows.
Because
Like
Frank
just
was a former
knows.
soldier as well, and he knows.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. So they have this real special and intense bond without even having to like speak the words that he's going through. Frank understands. And you lose that by having the lovely young lady at the flower shop in the movie. But like all of those scenes to me fell flat because I was comparing them to how wonderful they were in the book.
Yes, all those moments when he would come in, because in the book, he stops every day to this wholesale flower shop that's really not even a flower shop. It's like a
Right.
warehouse, and he has to like walk through these like plastic sheeting to get in the back. And Frank finds the, oldest flowers that are on discounted price because Tom is broke, and
Mm-hmm.
he sells him these like cheap flowers, and he doesn't understand. Frank doesn't understand why he always has them, and it's kind of like becomes a long running like, make sure your girl likes these, and Tom's like, and because he doesn't know that he's painting them, that's what he's doing. He's continuing his therapy
Mm-hmm.
by painting, and so we lose all of that. Which it's not like they removed any characters. They could have still had Frank, and they still could have had the marina owner. I didn't understand that change.
I didn't understand that change either. And even as I was watching the movie, I was like, okay, I can see that they're combining Frank with this other guy. Like maybe they just did it to save time to focus somewhere else. But then they introduced the flower shop owner. And I was like, well, wait, what actually was the point of that then?
Yeah, like then why didn't you just put Frank there?
Right.
And then we could have had our moment. So, so that leads us to Tom, stops by every day to get those flowers. And on his way back home one day, he's picked up these violets and he literally runs into Harper. They literally run into each other, which we see the opening scene of the movie. Harper's walking and they run into each other. However, that's where the similarities end, because in the movie, you can see the attraction early on. They're kind of like, oh, well, I just ran into this little cutie, and they kind of look back at each other and they're all smirking and smiling. In the book, they hate each other.
They hate each other instantly. And also, he is legit injured. Tom is legit injured. Like Vincent like attacks his leg. He's gotta like put it in an air cast. It's a bad, like he is not charmed by her. She is not charmed by him. And I actually really love that moment. I loved that.
Yes.
I was like, okay, this is not a meet cute because no one is feeling or looking cute right now.
And we find out why he calls her Doc because, she says, she makes a comment when she realizes he's hurt, and I guess she introduced herself, doctor. He's like, okay, well, cool. You're a doctor. She's like, no, I'm not a medical doctor. I'm a doctor of, like an art history doctor. And he's like, and you call yourself doctor?
Right.
And she's like, yes, because I earned it. And he's like, okay, Doc.
Yeah.
And she hates it.
She's
like, I hate it when he calls me that. But that's the whole enemies to lovers trope. That's how it starts. And it's my favorite trope in all of romance. And the fact that they took it from me.
I know.
Irritates me.
They ripped it from our hands. Like I was not expecting this book based on having seen the movie for it to be enemies to lovers. And it is like a strong enemies to lovers. Like they are real mean to each other. They are nasty. Yeah.
For a long time. But in between that, they have these little slip ups in their mind because they're like, I hate them even though they're pretty hot. Wait, what?
Yeah.
Why do I think they're, and then they get all flustered because they don't want to admit it. They don't want to admit they're attracted to each other. So they're so mean to each other. But that's part of the banter and that's part of the fun. Yep. They took it. They took it
from
all
us.
away.
And I mean, and what I loved about their meeting is that even though they cannot stand each other immediately, they also can't leave each other's presence. Like any other time, if you had a run-in where like your dog attacked somebody and they're injured and I mean, you check on them, make sure they're okay, and you get the hell out of there. You're not trying to like stay and chat. And Harper's asking
Yeah.
him questions. Why you got the flowers? What do you do? She confuses him with as like a flower delivery guy. And I'm like, girl, you keep putting your foot in your mouth. Like, take your dog who just bit this man and get out. But they are
Yeah.
so drawn to each other that like they don't want to leave each other. They want to be in the
Right.
presence of the other person, even though they don't even realize that that's what they're
Yeah,
doing. It's so good. It's so good.
it's so good. And we find out later that he actually had seen her many times in the coffee shop, but she's always been so busy that she's never noticed him. Like all these little things that, you know. And here's things that they changed that they really shouldn't have. And the friends, you know, the enemies to lovers is the big one. But he's grumpy in the book.
Yeah.
He's grumpy and just straight up like aloof and you know, and in the movie he is so like trying to like flirt with her and like get with her, and he's just very openly pursuing her, and I'm like, man, they fight so much in the book, and they, you know, that irritated me that they took away his grumpiness.
Yep. That irritated me too. I feel like they took the edge away from both characters because Harper's not that likable either. Like Harper is snotty in the book. She is selfish in the book. Like in the second chapter, the turn to the second chapter is great because it starts in her point of view and then it switches to his. And I think the first line is something like, she really doesn't remember me. And he's so mad at her because they've been going to the same coffee shop every morning and seeing each other every morning, and she has no idea. She's acting like she's never seen this 6'3" man in her entire life, and he's like, I cannot believe this woman does not know who I am. And I mean, it's because Harper's not the friendliest. She doesn't remember the name of the barista at the coffee shop that she goes to every morning. Like
every day.
Right. She's very like laser focused on her career and that's it. And I love that she's not super likable right off the bat, like right immediately, because it makes those little moments where she does something so sweet and so wonderful even better, because you understand that like she's changing and she's evolving. And the best part of this book is kind of her transformation, I think. I think that is one of the best parts of this story, because so often in romance, it's the guy who changes. It's the dude who changes, who comes around, who becomes more human, more emotional, more loving. And in this case, it's Harper. She is the one who has the huge change of heart at the end. And I'm sure we'll talk about that, like those parts of the book. And Hallmark really like took away both of their edginess, which is such a bummer because it made their love story so fun and very hot and very interesting, you know?
Yes, because they, as much as they dislike each other, they have moments where they acknowledge their attraction and they straight up like make out hardcore, and they're like, we don't even like each other, but we're doing this because we just can't help it. And at the heart of it, these are just two very lonely people
who have been
that
hurt.
Have put up these, massively. And you find out their backstories and you find out why they're so hurt and why they've built these walls. But slowly they, you know, these walls come down, and in each of them see these very vulnerable moments in each other, and that's where they start to really appreciate each other, and they really start to grow, and they really start to fall in love. And for me, it was more, you're right, it was more Harper's transformation that did it for me, because we see it through Tom, because he sees the real her beneath all of her walls, and he's like, that's the woman. Yes, he's like, that, there she is. That's her. And whenever she puts her guard back up, he's like, I can see it happening, and I want that other woman back. Like, and
guys, he calls her his art goddess, and he can tell when she's the art goddess and when she's Doc, and
Yes,
only he can see the real difference. Oh my goodness, swoon. I can't handle it. It's so good.
for real. And it it frustrates me again. I'm just going to be the overriding theme here. It just frustrates me that they stripped all that out. I mean, the conflict in the movie was basically but they don't even really pump up the promotion that much. They're just like, here's the art show. And in the book, he's hesitant to show his art. She basically has to force him
Mm-hmm.
to show him her once she realizes that he paints, because he comes into the he comes into the art bar, the wine and painting place, and he sees that she's running behind and the class is going to be over and the people are going to have unfinished paintings. So he just jumps in and starts helping, and he starts helping to finish. And she realizes, oh my God, he can paint. And that's how this all kicks off. But he doesn't want to admit it. And she finally goes to see his paintings. And when she sees his work, this girl jumps him because she just cannot help it. She sees the soul of it, and it just like, woo!
It's so good. She basically follows him home. She's like, I'm going home with you. I'm looking at these
You're
paintings.
gonna show me this artwork.
She's
Damn
like,
it.
wait, you live on a boat? Okay, I'm coming aboard. And she's there. They've got their dogs. She looks at the paintings, and like you said, she literally jumps on him and kisses him. She is so like overwhelmed with emotion, overcome, and she just lays one on him, and it is so good. And cut to him backing her up against a wall to continue the kiss, which he does quite often, which is something I am powerless to. I mean, I was not okay in those moments. He does it multiple times, and I just need Miss Terry Wilson to know, I see you, girl. I see you, girl.
Listen,
I see you, girl.
I was out there making batches of iced tea over and over again. I was like, I'm about to be out of iced tea and I still got half of the book left. So let me go ahead and make some more, because I can tell it's about to get real. And he's just like, whoa.
I know.
He is so like taken aback. And he's like, so of course we don't get that part in the movie. We don't get her reaction to his art. She's just like, oh my gosh, this is so great. Hey, want to be in my art show?
I know.
I'm like, man, it's so much more powerful than that. But that's the thing, is in the book, he finally, leans into it, and he realizes that he does have, a lot to offer, and they really pull each other out of each other's shells. And I just want to say, I know this happens later, but he goes every day to buy those discount flowers. But when he goes and sees those lilies, they're called Picasso calla lilies, and he pays full price for them, and he's going to actually give them to her as real flowers and not paint them. And she has like a bad day, and she like, I don't know, she like yells at him for something, or she's just like real curt, and he withdraws, and he's like, never mind, I'm going to go paint these. And she's like, what are those for? Nothing. What are those flowers? Nothing. Gets all upset. But then he paints them, and there comes a moment when he finally tells her that they were for her. I mean, I might have teared up.
And then when she finds out that he paid full price, because he said they were on sale, and when she finally, I think we'll talk about that scene more in full later, because I have so much to say about it. But she has a conversation with Frank, and he's like, yeah, he paid full price for those. And then also the scene where she decides that she's like going to take his advice and just paint what her heart desires. I know, I can't handle it. And y'all already know what her heart desires is Tom, and she paints Tom, and then he finds it, he sees it. Just come pick me up off the floor. Like that whole, oh my gosh, that whole storyline was so beautiful. I was obsessed with it.
They could have had that same moment in the movie. They could have had the moment where he comes in and sees that painting, because I will give him this. The painting that she does in the movie of their kiss that was a beautiful painting.
Yeah.
It was It was gorgeous. And I'm like, do they sell reprints of that? Because I sure would hang that
It's
up in my house.
pretty.
It really was. But all the power was in, because at that point in the book, Tom knows that he loves her. He's still not sure about her feelings towards him. And he goes in and he can't sleep because it's the night before the show or whatever.
Mhm.
And he's looking for blank canvases. And he's like, oh, I think she has some, because she always reuses her canvases from that wine and painting class. And he goes and uncovers it, thinking it's a blank canvas, and he sees him, like he sees her painting of him, and he's just like, oh my God, she does love me.
And then pause for my dog growling at some. I was like, Zero, what is happening? Are you done, buddy? Okay, he just gave me the I'm finished growl. Oh my God, so rude.
That's awesome.
So rude. But so once he sees that it's his face, he goes to wake her up. He cannot wait to see her, to talk to her. And he goes to wake her up, and it is
I needed a lot of
I was
iced
about to
tea.
say it is 20 pitchers of iced tea. That scene. And I
need
think
a lot of iced tea.
I know. And I think that what's so great about Terry's love scenes is that they are so, you need so much iced tea because there is so much emotion that she has built up. And by the time it reaches that level where they are together, it is overwhelming because it has been building and building and building, and it really means something and it really matters, especially this scene with these two characters.
Yes. And it's but after that scene is when the big art show happens.
Mhm.
So they go into the art show fully like, they've already slept together. Like they have all these feelings and stuff. And so when they go into the art show, this is what frustrates me. In the movie, yes, they've kissed and they have these cute moments in the movie, which if you haven't read the book, I'm guessing they probably did come off very cute, where she's like, no more kissing. And he's like, okay, no more kissing, whatever, which that's cute. But I'm like, dude, when book kissing is very different from movie kissing. Book kissing has people up against walls and shirts off and bosses walking in on them going, what's happening in here?
Exactly.
And they're like, oh, hey. Yeah. So no more kissing is very different in the book. But, by this point in the book, you're right. They've built up so much together and so much emotion, and they're falling in love. And it's very overwhelming. So when they get to the art show, and it's revealed who he is, which is very different from the movie. In the movie, Lars makes this giant announcement. Attention, everybody.
Mhm.
He's not who we say we are. And we'll get to that part in a minute. But in the book, Lars pulls Harper over privately and says, I know what you're doing. And I know all of it. And I know the truth. And I'm going to expose you. And Harper freaks out and says, I'll do whatever. Like just like in the movie, I'll do whatever you want. And he tells her, I want the promotion. And she's like, okay, let me work it out. Just don't expose him because he is worth it in terms of like his art. Don't embarrass him. I will take the fall from him. And Lars is like, oh my God, you fell in love with him. It's this big scene. And it's her sacrificing her job because in the end, she realizes at that moment, that's not what she wants. She doesn't want to be a teacher. So she sacrifices it for him. And it's this whole moment of self-realization and feeling at peace with herself for finally doing what she wants to do in life. And so she resigns so that way Lars can take the promotion. And it's this big moment because they've shared so much, and it's that part was so moving to me that she did this for him. And then Tom realizes it and figures it out, but it doesn't matter because she's like, what's done is done. I'm happy. I feel at peace with this. But in the movie, Lars makes the announcement he's not who we say he is, and the director says, "Is that true?" And she's like, "Yes, I'm sorry." And Tom says, "No, I'm sorry." And then they just calmly walk out of the art show.
I know. It's such a dud. It lands so flat. And it's because like it makes me so mad because they tried to make it like this big scene in the movie, like this big public scene. And
Yes.
it didn't have to be that, because I think I am with you. And the more impactful way to do it was to make it small, like it was in the book, because it was really an internal and emotional conflict within Harper. Like that was the interesting thing that was happening in the scene. And it was so
Yes.
much more powerful because she's realizing, I have been so selfish. I have been blinded by my ambition to like, I have only cared about this promotion and I have been treating people badly to get there. Like, I cannot believe I jeopardized Tom and what could be a great career for him, all because of my selfishness. And it is incredibly moving and incredibly intense because, like we talked about before, like you have seen how prickly she is and how difficult she is for the entire book. So to get to that moment and to see her finally get it and to finally be like, no, I am worth more than this doctor title. I have found someone I am in love with, and he is more important than any of this BS. Like that is so much more powerful than the big scene that they have in the movie that just is such a dud. And then it's also like, okay, the other thing that bothered me about that is that in the movie, they make Harper's ex-boyfriend a character and they make him a thing. And you think he's going to be the villain. Like you kind of think he's going to be the one who exposes all of this because he's like, I don't trust this guy. I think you're being taken advantage of. And so you kind of think he's going to be the one to blow it all up in the movie. But then in the movie, they have Lars do it, who's been like a non-factor in the entire movie. So like that didn't even make sense. Like it honestly would have been more impactful to just have the ex-boyfriend bring it up. At least that would have been some kind of like more major conflict.
Right.
And that was another thing that confused me. I was like, what is happening?
I don't know why they transferred all of this stuff with Lars to Rick, because in the book, Rick is part of her internal conflict with herself because she stops painting because Rick gives her a bad review and amongst other bad reviews. And so she's like, obviously, I'm not cut out to be a painter. So she loses her confidence and she's just like, I'm not painting again, which leads her to teaching.
Right.
So Rick, you don't ever actually meet Rick in the book. He's just referred to. He's just mentioned like, oh, my ex-boyfriend, Rick, who wrote this review. But that's part of her internal conflict with herself on whether she can, try again as an artist and regain her confidence. And Lars is the external, conflict, as part of like, he's going to be the one that blows up, Tom and Harper.
Right.
And all of it. And so I don't know. Again, I get combining things and making things more efficient for the pacing of a movie, but I don't understand why they transferred part of that to Rick and brought him as a real character into the movie, because it just, to me, it didn't do anything.
Well, and what was the point of bringing him in and using him as like a villain type character to then not have him be a villain? He does nothing. Like there's even a scene at the art show where where we find out that, the paintings are flying off the shelves and everybody wants one. And the ex-boyfriend just pats him on the back and is like, yeah, good job. Enjoy that success. And I'm like, what was the point of introducing this character, making him seem like a villain, for him to then just show up and be supportive at the final art show? It didn't make sense. It's like, if you were going to combine those two characters, which I can kind of understand, like Hallmark loves an ex-boyfriend waiting in the wings story. But if you're going to make that choice, then use that character.
Yeah, because it's not like he was even really trying to get her back.
No.
Because when I rewatched this, I was like, oh, is he going to try and like come and get her back? Like when they went out to dinner together, when Rick and Harper went out to dinner, I was like, is Tom going to show up and see them together and think they're dating again? Like, I just thought, what is he doing? Like,
and he literally says, I'm concerned about your art, or I have concerns about your art. And I was like, this is what you're about? Concerns about her art? It just
man,
makes
send me an email. You don't need to track me down for dinner.
Or don't ever talk to me again after you gave me a bad review. Like, let's let this die, all of it. You don't have to care about me. You don't have to care about my art. You don't have to care about my career. Like, you don't exist anymore, buddy. It made
you don't got to worry about it. Well, it just, so there's that big scene in the gallery where they both apologize and they just turn around and walk out. Like they just turn around and just walking out like slowly. It's not even like they're like, hurry up and get your coat, let's go. They just stroll and they're having a conversation like that was really terrible.
They're like, ooh, wow, that sucked. Deep breath.
Yeah. We got what we deserved. And I'm like, how are you not making a fast getaway?
It doesn't make any sense. And then
and the party's still happening behind them.
The party's still happening. And then Harper, then they go on their apology tour where no one is mad. No one is mad.
For real. It's the easiest firing I've ever seen. She walks into the director's office and he's like, well, the school will be fine, even though you tarnished its reputation and made us liars. And I'm like, the school would not be fine. This would last forever. And he's like, the school will be fine. I can't say the same for your career. And she's like,
chuckle with a smile on his face.
Yeah, she's like, you're right. Well, good luck to you. And he walked out.
They shake hands and he literally says, like, I want the best for you. And they part ways friends. What? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm like,
what are you talking about? And then Tom goes to apologize to that gallery owner, which, why was she a character in this movie? What exactly was her purpose?
Because there was nothing there I'm glad you said that, because in the movie, I don't understand why Harper goes to pitch his work to her. But side note, do people really pitch to galleries with their actual unprotected canvases just tucked under an arm?
She drove in her Fiat, which is also inexplicable. How did you fit 4 giant canvases, like you said, unprotected in your tiny Fiat, Harper? And how did you...
they're just rubbing against each other.
And she just carries them into that office and sets them down one by one. She's carrying them all together. They're touching, probably paint rubbing all on them. I was like, this seems wrong on so many levels.
Isn't that what portfolios are for? You make prints and you flip them and you show them like that. But I'm not a painter, so maybe there's something that I don't know about. But so I don't. And I thought, what is her purpose going to be pitching his work? She's already got him the show. Like, what is this going to be? And in the end, it amounts to nothing, because when he goes to apologize to her, she's like, well, I'll keep, good luck to your career, or you deserve it, or something like that. And then he ends up showing at the flower shop.
Make it make sense.
I mean, the whole time in the movie, he's like, I just wanted to be alone on my boat painting. But by the end of it, he's like, oh, I can put my paintings up in this flower shop? That sounds awesome.
I can't deal. Oh my God.
Nothing made sense. Okay, so, but the end, when they're on their apology tour, because I think this is what you wanted to talk about, your favorite scene with Frank.
Oh my goodness. So in the book, I think the best scene is they have, in the book, they have shared a wonderful night together the night before the show. The night before the show, where after he found his painting, he also, one of my favorite things in romances, he sleeps for like 15 hours because he hasn't had a good night's rest in years. But the second he is in Harper's bed, he can sleep peacefully because he is where he belongs. He's also probably exhausted.
Yeah, I was gonna say. There's a lot of iced tea drinking that night. My man was tired.
He was really worn out. So she leaves him to sleep, and she has tracked down Frank, from whom Tom has been buying all of his flowers. And she goes into this warehouse and she meets Frank, and they talk a little bit, and he knows that she is quote unquote Tom's girl. He's like, "Oh, you're the girl." And she's like, "The girl? What?" And he's like, "Tom's girl. I know you're Tom's girl." And she goes, "Well, I don't know if I know it's late. I know it's short notice, but did you know that Tom is an artist, that he is a painter?" And Frank's like, "No, I had no idea." And Harper hands him the invitation to the art show, and Frank gets to see Tom's work, and he literally cries. It brings a tear to his eye to see how talented Frank is, and that he has been painting his flowers for so long. And he was like, I've never seen my flowers like painted like this, represented like this. Had I known that this is what he was doing with these flowers that he comes and buys discount every night, I would have given them to him for free. Like, this is beautiful. And so this man is so moved, and Harper is moved. Like, Harper grabs his hand at some point because they both know like how talented Tom is, but also how tortured he is, and how him having this outlet has meant so much to everybody. And they both care about him so much that like they're holding hands. They're just so moved. And so Frank is like, "Yes, I will be there. I will be at the show. I wouldn't miss it." So then when they go to the show and Tom sees Frank, he's like shocked, but also so moved. He's like, "I can't think of any other person I'd want more to be here." And he's like, "But Harper's going to kill me. Like, if she finds out that there's someone here that knows me, knows the real me, she's going to kill me." So he goes over to Frank. He's talking to Frank. Frank says his wife is over by the daffodils because they're her favorite. Oh my gosh. I'm just like screaming and crying and swooning this entire time. And Frank's like, "I want you to meet my wife. She's by the daffodils. Those are her favorite. Like, I wish you would have told me. You are so talented. I had no idea." And Tom's basically like, or Frank's like, "Yeah, I had no idea until your girl showed up in the shop." And Tom is like, "Oh my God, she wanted him here. She knew how much it would mean to me." And then he seeks out Harper in the crowd, and they share a look from across the room because he knows that she did that for him, and she knows how much it meant to him. And it is so perfect.
It's so good. It's so good.
It is so perfect. I can't handle it. Like, that entire, I'm going to say that last quarter of the book, I could not put it down. I was just like entranced. I was transported to this, this little part of Boston. Oh my gosh. It was just so like expertly executed. I don't even understand how she pulled that off. Oh God.
Yes. And it was torture because I didn't want to finish it, but then I couldn't read it fast enough because I was so in it. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, it's almost over." But that's what makes me mad, is that we lost that friendship.
Yep.
Frank in the movie, yes, they're friends, but it's not the same at all. And The romance is the main part of it. That's obviously why we like these movies, but the friendships
Yep.
and to lose that too, I don't know. That was even worse to me because I love that moment so much. I
Oh,
really do.
there's nothing better. It was perfect. It was perfect in every way.
Because the whole point, like you find out through the movie that Tom has been jumping from place to place his whole life. His dad was in the service. He was a military guy and he was always going on tours. And so Tom got shuffled around to a lot of relatives. He slept on a lot of couches. There was real no stability. And you find out that he really didn't have a place that he's ever called home.
Mhm.
Literally and figuratively, he's never felt in place anywhere. And by meeting Harper and eventually moving in with her, just like in the movie, he slowly starts to realize like this could be where I belong. And by the end of the movie, he's found Harper, he's found home with Harper, like Harper, that's it.
Mhm.
And yes, he now, they move in together, but then he's got these friends. He's got Frank,
Mhm.
he's got the marina owners who were like, you can't stay here if you don't winterize your boat because you'll literally freeze to death and die. But they become friends. Like, we didn't even talk about, oh gosh, what is her name I forget her name, the woman who works with Harper.
Oh,
They
Lindsay.
like helped Lindsay in the movie. It's Brenda Cricklow, who I love.
Me
I love
too.
Brenda Cricklow. I love her. But we don't even talk about her. But they all become friends, and at the end, when Harper leaves and resigns in the book, she brings Lindsay with her, and she ends up buying Art Bar
Mhm.
and turns it into like an after school program for kids and like this like really cool like
And
painting. I mean,
painting the
it's so
shoes. Like,
awesome.
it's so
Yes,
brilliant because Harper loves the kids' classes. And she's like, I should, have
yes.
this where the kids can paint their shoes. Oh my gosh, it's so cute.
And so she brings Lindsay to run it, and Tom is there, and so he finds this community, and he finally feels like he's home, and none of that is represented in the movie.
Mm-mm.
There's no, you know, yes, you could make it all that without him being grumpy, but the point is that he was grumpy because he didn't want to associate with people. He just wanted to be left
Yep.
alone. He was just like, I'm broken. I don't
Mm-hmm.
need anybody. It's fine. And Harper's pretty much the same way, watching her mom get dumped over and over
Yep.
again by these men in her life, and then her dad leaving her family when she was young. And she's like, I don't need this. I don't need relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Everything I have is fine. Leave me alone. But
I
together,
know.
they overcome it all. And I'm like, where was any hint of this, any whiff of
I
this
know.
in the movie? It was just stripped down to, I kind of want this promotion, which they barely talk about, and him dog walking, which I don't understand why that's such a big deal that he's also a dog walker.
Yeah. And it also, in the book, the whole thing with him walking the dog is a lot more. The whole thing is a lot more nuanced because in the movie he's walking like 10 dogs and it's very obvious that he is a dog walker. But in the book
Yeah,
it's a lot fuzzier, right? Because he's just walking his
right.
dog and this other dog named Buster, who is like a little mascot in Boston because he's a
Yes.
Boston Terrier. And so everyone knows Buster. So when Lars sees him walking Buster, like Tom really does a good job of being like, oh, yeah, it's just my neighbor's dog. I walk him when I walk my dog. And it really seems like less of a big deal. But in the movie, they make it like such a big thing. And that's what I kind of mean by like the dumbing down of it, right? Like, it's
Yes.
like we're going to take this little moment that was, you know, that was perfect on its own in the book, and we're just going to like make it so obvious that so that people watching really know that this is a problem, that Lars has seen him
Right.
walking dogs. We're just going to give him 10 dogs so that we can, signal to the viewers that this is a problem. It's like, you did not need all of that.
No, because that was part of the, oh my God, in the book, because the whole time Lars and Harper in the book are just, they're at each other all the time just because they're actual professional rivals. And so, we don't at all know that he's this whole time been investigating Tom. Whereas in the movie, we see Lars actively questioning people, who he is and what he's, all of this stuff, but we don't see it. So that's why the scene at the gallery when Lars is like, hey, I know what you're doing. That's why it hits you like, oh shit.
Mhm.
He knows, and he reveals everything that he has learned and investigated in the background
Mhm.
in the book this whole time. And that's what makes it so shocking because you're like, what?
I know. In the book, he says, I hired a private investigator. And you're like, wait a minute, what? You did, huh?
Yes.
Yeah. Like it has
And
a
he
bigger
uncovers
Yeah.
a lot. It does. It's way bigger. And, but the thing is when it comes down to it, some people need two jobs. Like, I don't understand why in both the
Totally.
book and the movie, I'm like, a lot of artists have second jobs because that's what they do.
I know. And it was also very like Lars in the movie. He's like, shouldn't you be working on your show, on your art for your show? And it's like, the man isn't allowed to walk some dogs. Like, he's not allowed to see the sun. He's not allowed to breathe fresh air because he's working on some paintings. In what world does that make sense?
Yeah. And I'm like, well, shouldn't you be at work too?
Right.
And yet here you are.
Yeah, and yet here you
Here we are
are.
together. Worrying about what I'm doing.
I know.
There you go, Lars. But just mind your business and you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah,
But,
keep it moving, Lars. Get your coffee and go.
and then the fight they have afterwards, when in the movie, when Tom comes back after seeing Lars and he's like, oh, I saw Lars today. And she's like, what? Because, yeah, I saw me when I was walking. She's like, does he think you're a dog walker? And I'm like, lady,
I know.
I had 10 dogs. No, I own all of these dogs. Walking them down the street. And she gets mad and I'm like, this is so forced.
Forced.
This is so...
Yeah, forced is the best word for it. Like, a lot of the conflict seemed very forced.
And like I said earlier, this is the part that Terry makes it so natural in the book because they do have the same argument, but it's a lot different.
Yeah.
And you understand both sides. And it's just... I wish we could do... Well... I wish they could remake this movie. Can Hallmark start remaking movies from the Bill Abbott era?
Please. I know.
Just let's do a little remake on this one. I feel bad in saying that because, it wasn't the worst I've ever seen. Which I shouldn't say it like that. That's terrible. It wasn't the worst. But it's just...
They just downgraded so many of the stakes. Like... And you need some kind of tension and stakes in these movies. Like, I'm sorry, but you do. And like every conflict that was introduced, what drove me crazy about this movie is that in the book, there are a lot of secrets. There are a lot of people holding things close to their vest because there is a lack of trust with Harper and Tom in particular because of their pasts and because what they've been through. And in this, it's like there's a secret for 30 seconds and then it's revealed. Like Harper, like in the movie, Harper secures this one artist for the show, then he drops out. And you find that out immediately. Like, she goes into that meeting and she's like, well, the artist has dropped out and I don't have another one. So I'm going to have to figure something out. Whereas in the book, so much tension is built up into this because her boss doesn't know that the artist is unavailable. The artist
he's in jail.
The artist who originally was supposed to be in the show was arrested. And so that's why Harper needs someone. Like, the stakes are so much higher. And so she's trying to keep it a secret that this guy has been arrested, but also keep Tom's real background a secret. But in the book, like in the movie, they just take away all that tension and put everything on the table. And I'm like, well, that adds some intrigue, right? And then
Right.
also in the book, Harper, when she goes to her boss to say I switched artists and she's explaining who this new artist is, she's just making shit up. Like she is just saying shit. And even in the book, she's like, I don't even know where any of what I was saying was coming from. That's when it comes out that she says this is a descendant of Van Gogh, whatever. In the movie, he says, there's always been lore in my family that I could be a descendant of Van Gogh. And Harper's like, oh,
and I'm like,
I know. And Harper's like, oh, well, that's a great idea. So then that becomes their running story. And so all of that tension is also gone because in the book, that's another added layer because she's like, well, I said all this stuff about you, so you got to learn it. Like, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, if you want to be a part of this and you want to collect that check, like, I'm sorry, but you got to come to Art Bar every night and work till midnight. And I'm going to quiz you. Like, it just adds adds that tension and those stakes. And in the movie, they just completely wipe it out as soon as they bring it up.
Right. Because, in the book, she's like, so can you be in this show? And by the way,
right.
I might have said that you might be related to Van Gogh. And she's like, what? What?
And he's like, who's
what are you talking about? Well, one of the things they actually take away also in the movie is in the book, Tom, his whole job for years was to go and clear out scenes like in active duty, like, and make sure there are no bombs and make sure there's no explosives and make sure everything's safe. So he is trained to look at everything around him, his surroundings, his, look at trash, look at everything around him and process it and memorize it because he has to know immediately if he's in danger. And so when he comes back to civilian life, he's really good at remembering a lot of information immediately. So when she starts teaching him all this art stuff, so he becomes this like encyclopedia of art, he does. Right. He remembers everything instantly. Right. And, they have these, well, they're not actually quizzes. They're more like strip quizzes. I was going to say
they are strip quizzes and they are fabulous.
And he remembers a lot. And Harper pays for it because she's like, you'll never remember this. And he's like, right, I won't remember it. Why don't you ask me and see?
Cut to her taking off her shirt.
Yeah, cut to a lot of shirtlessness. Well, so in the movie, they make it seem, he's like, I don't know how I'm going to remember all this. This is a lot. I don't know. And I'm like, no, dude, this guy is aloof in the book, as aloof as hell, but he's also confident and cocky and just like, oh, you might be the master of this art side, but I'm about to be the master of the Harper side. Yeah. So, of course, we're not going to get strip quizzing in Hallmark.
If only.
Or is she gonna take off her cardigan to a turtleneck?
She's going to take off her pearls and then her blazer.
Yeah. Let me go and take off this blazer and then I'll have a cardigan shell and a turtleneck under it.
And then a tank top under that.
Just try me.
Oh my gosh.
So, well, and the ending was different. I mean, it wasn't that much different, but the ending in the book, we get a very amazing, gorgeous and swoony proposal.
Oh my gosh.
And in the book, we get an awkward, let me show you Vincent can sit. And then she shows him the painting and they kiss in front of all of her students. I couldn't watch.
It does
so awkward.
It does not compare. We literally get, like you said in the book, we literally get like a moonlight proposal in a beautiful sculpture garden with two people like bearing their souls for the first time in their lives, and
Yes.
and cut to them married.
And
An
epilogue
epilogue.
and
They're married. They own art
house
bar. Yeah.
renovations.
Yeah.
I mean, if this was made now, they'd already have a TikTok where they'd be showing renovations of the art bar.
Exactly.
We'd be all up in it. But
you know what else we lost in the movie? Okay. I laughed out loud at Art Bar at the names of the brushes because
yes,
I am frankly pissed off that this isn't in the movie, because at the Art Bar in the book, Harper has part of it is Harper is really struggling because here she is, this like classically trained art historian and artist, right? Yet she's working at a place where people get drunk and like paint basic things, and they have had to name the brushes by size. So the biggest brush is named Big Daddy. Harper will literally be like, okay, pick up Big Daddy.
And Tom walks in at one point right as she says it, and he's like,
Big Daddy.
Big Daddy. What is happening?
It's so good. And then she's teaching the little kids, and she's like, okay, pick up Baby Bear. And it's just so funny and cute. It's like little things like that I missed.
Okay, so I missed that part, yes. And I missed the kiss, obviously, when she first sees this artwork, because she's like overwhelmed. And she's like, oh my God, let me just jump this guy. And then the part for me that I missed was when Tom's boat, okay, Tom needs to winterize his boat. But it's getting closer and closer to winter, and he doesn't have any money. So he's telling Harper, I can't do these art lessons anymore. I've got to start walking dogs. Like, I got to start up in that because I need the money to prepare the boat. Otherwise, I won't have a place to live. And Harper's like, you can't do that because I need you here for these art. It's back and forth. And Lindsay's like, hey, why don't you move in with Harper? And then you have all the time in the world. And they go back and forth because they're like, do I want him to? I don't know. Do I? It's back and forth. Well, finally he moves in. And so she's at the house when she knows that he's about to show up to move in. And she's like, I don't know what to do. I'll make him some cookies. So she gets these sliced and baked cookies. And she's like, usually I just buy these and I just eat it straight from the wrapper. I just eat it dough, but I can't just hand him a spoon and be like, welcome. So she slices them to bake them. But he comes in and he's like, are you baking for me? She's like, no, I always do this. And he's like, no, you don't, because, he can tell that she's like, fine, I made them for you. Okay. I thought you'd want to feel welcome. And he kind of plays it off. But later he's like, I was overwhelmed because nobody's ever welcomed me like that. And then he finds out when he goes to the room that she sets up for him that she didn't put down like an air mattress, that she bought a real bed and put it in that studio so he could have a real bed to sleep in. And he's like, oh my God, between the cookies and the bed, and he's like starting to feel at home. And they just skipped over all of that. And I'm like, because the first time that he moves in, it's really awkward because they are very aware of each other. And they're very, because he's like, you're afraid to be alone with me, aren't you? And she's like, nuh-uh. As she nods her head a little bit, maybe. He's like, well, and he tells her, he's like, don't worry, you'll kiss me again. I'm like, what? Terry, stop it, but don't. This is awesome.
I'm right there with you. I really missed the cookie scene, especially because she said, I do this all the time. And then he saw a price tag hanging off of her oven mitts.
Oh, yeah. That's what it was. He's like, really?
He's like, you've literally never used these. And I'm right there with you. I missed that scene. And I also missed, there is a scene the first time they, get together.
Mhm.
They share a dance first. And why couldn't you include
You're
that?
right.
Yes, I
Oh my
lived for that
gosh.
because he's always like throwing her off kilter. And I love that in a romantic
Because she
pairing.
thinks they're going upstairs
Mhm.
and he's like, "Hey," and she's all like, "What?" He's like, "Dance with me."
Yes. And she's like, "What?" And it just
And they do, and it's
completely
not corny,
it's
y'all.
not
It's
corny
not.
because they've been playing music all night as like their kind of background while she's quizzing him. And he's like, "Dance with me." And I'm like, why wasn't this moment in the movie? It's such a beautiful, sweet moment because what he also says to her is like, "There's no rush. I'm not going anywhere. Like, I'm here with you right now. Like, I'm with you." I know. Swoon.
Okay, can I just tell you very quickly, I know they couldn't well, they could have put this in the movie. They really could have. They really, really could have. But there was the very, very end of the book, right before the epilogue, I literally, like, yelled out, "Terry, oh my god, you didn't." Because and that's why I posted that GIF afterwards, update I finished, and I posted, like, "Yes, queen," because I was just like, How dare you do this to my emotions?" So in the book, the coffee shop plays a big part because they meet there, or that's where she hires him, and she goes back a few times. Harper does, and Tom, is there. And when she meets or tells the barista, and he's like, "My name's Marshall," and she tries to make an effort from then on out. She says she needs to go in there. Oh, because at one night at Art Bar, she gets drunk by
The
accident,
best.
and she's on her way home, and she's like, "I'm going to pop in and get coffee." And the guy Marshall is closing, and he's like, "I'm closing." She's like, "Can I just anything?" And he's like, "All I have is plain black." And she's like, "That's fine." So he gives it to her. And he's like, "No charge." And she takes a drink. She's like, "Oh." And he's like, "Don't you mean, oh God, yes?"
Yes.
And she's like, "What?" She's like thrown off. She's like, "What?" She's like, the sizing is, oh God, yes." And because they make a reference to the weird sizing, like it's, oh God, and oh God, yes. That's the big one.
Right.
And she's like, uh-huh. And so that it's a running joke. And so at the end, when he asks her to marry him,
Oh.
and she's like looking at him, and he's like, "Is that a yes?" And he's like, "Is that a yes?" And she was like, "Oh God, yes." And I was like, "Terry, listen, how dare you do this to me?
It was so good.
How dare you come full circle and make me fall off my couch going, oh my God, what?"
It was so good. That proposal really got me. Like, that choked me up because they have both come so far at that point. The walls have been decimated, like just torn to the ground, and they just want to be together so bad. And and then they are married within 4 months. So, they did not waste any time.
Major book hangover when this was done.
Same.
I was like,
Same.
this is not fair.
Same.
I need to just block out schedules and just be like, okay, if we're going to cover more Terry Wilson books, I just need to know that for the next week, I'm going to be worthless and I won't be able to read anything else. And so let me just block out 2 full weeks for this. But yeah, they could have kept those little cutesy names, and they didn't.
I know. I was bummed
And they
about
brought
the
it full
coffee
circle.
names too, because they're like, yes, yes,
And-
please. Oh God, yes. Like that's your tall grande venti. And it's those little touches really make the book really special, and they could have made the movie really special too.
I know. Just a little
bit.
So I guess it's probably obvious, but I'm going to ask you officially. Which was better?
Let me count the ways in which I enjoyed the book more. For me, the book was better. And I understand that this episode fully was a book. This was a book swoon podcast. And because of that, like, if you're listening to this, I need you guys to go read this book right now. Like, that's all I have to say.
Yes.
Like, this book like really hit me in my feels, and I was really moved by it. I was really surprised by it. And if you saw this movie, like Lisa said earlier, if you saw this movie and weren't into it, that's okay. Do not let it stop you from reading the book. The book is a completely different beast, and you will not be sorry. It really, like, I texted Lisa. So Lisa finished the book and she had posted on Twitter about it. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm in for a treat. So I started and I text Lisa and I go, I'm obsessed with this. I'm in love with this. I can't handle this. And let me tell you, I sent her those messages after 2 chapters. Like, that's how intensely I felt about this book in 2 freaking chapters. And it did not let me down. For the entire rest of the book, it only got better. That last quarter of the book was like, I had to, again, as I did with Terry's other book that we covered, I had to get the audio because I had to go walk my dog and I couldn't stop reading. So I needed to listen to hear how it ended because I didn't want to wait the half hour to come home from my walk and read the book. Like, it's great. It's just great. Please read it.
Yes. I couldn't say it better than myself, so I'm just going to say book. No question.
Done. Done.
That's it. Sorry to the Hallmark movie. And that's not to say that I didn't enjoy Taylor Cole and Steve Lund because they're both extremely hot. And seeing them together.
I agree. And also, I love Steve Lund. I think he is amazing. And I quite honestly, I wish he was in more Hallmark movies because I adore him. And I think he is like so charming and handsome and tall. And he just seems like so cool and fun. And what bummed me out was that this character in the book is just meant to be the surly sailor. He is meant to be a grump. He is not meant to be the charming Steve Lund that we all love so much. And
he's meant to be Schitt's Creek Steve Lund.
Exactly. That is who he is supposed to be. Exactly. But the writing didn't let him do that and let him go there. And that's a bummer because he could have done it. You're 100% right. He was.
That's what I want.
Steve Lund.
Yes.
Yeah.
Steve and Patrick and
David.
David, Steve Lund. That's who. Because when I first saw this movie, it didn't have an effect. I was like, oh, whatever. It didn't make any impressions on me. I remember just being like, whatever. So when it came time for this book. And I read the book and I was getting super into it and I was seeing those characters because I'd already had Taylor Cole and Steve Lund in my mind. I kept visualizing Schitt's Creek Steve Lund.
Right.
And I'm like, yeah, bring me that guy.
Exactly.
Bring me that attitude and that sexiness and manliness to this Tom Stone.
Yep.
Not to say that they're not both great. It's not that the actors did not portray them well in what they had. It's just
right.
The actual content of the movie, there was just nothing there. Because Steve, I mean, again, these are both hot people.
Right.
And of course, they're nice to look at.
Exactly. And I completely agree with you. Like, the screenplay was not written to hold those 2 characters as they were in the book. Like we said before, like all of their edge, all of their flaws essentially that made them so interesting in the book were written out of the movie. They were just 2 perfect people who, got caught up in a lie and that was the end of the story. And in the book, it's a whole lot different.
Yeah. And can you imagine? Okay, you remember in the movie when right before Lars questions the woman who owns the dog, and he's like, I'm looking for someone to walk my dog, and she's like, oh yeah, Tom, he's great. I had this moment. I was like, can you imagine taking that little phone number off the flyer and be like, dog walker, I need a dog walker, and then Steve Lund shows up and you're like, you're my dog walker? Let me go ahead and buy 6 more dogs.
I feel like
I'm gonna need you around the clock, sir.
I'd be like, you must have the wrong house because I've never seen a dog walker that looked like you. Mm-mm.
Can you imagine?
I'd be shocked.
It would be literally like me actually looking up like they do in the movies.
Mhm.
Oh, hello.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. I need you here round the clock. I have a lot of dogs. They're not here now, but they will be later. And I need you to just stop on by at any
I
time.
have 12 dogs, one for every hour of the day. I'll see you all day long. I will see you all day
Great,
long.
thanks.
Yes.
And that woman was so calm about it. She's like, thanks for walking. I'm like, lady, do you see what we're all
I know.
okay.
I would have been giggling uncontrollably, like, thanks so much.
I probably would have had to fire him because I would have been so awkward. And he'd been like, what's with this woman? I'd just be like, here's my dog. Thanks. Thanks.
Then
bye.
he cut to him walking in front of your house and he sees you looking out the window, like with your iced tea.
Face pressed against the window, sipping on my iced tea, going, like that TikTok I sent you where that woman spits out her cereal.
I watched that maybe 20 times a day because I was just like, Lisa, now wait a damn minute, because I was not prepared for that transformation. I was not ready. I've never seen anything like that.
If y'all don't know, I recently joined the world of TikTok and I found the nerd to nerd hot transformation videos and I shared them. So there it is.
And I lost my mind.
So we did it. We did it. We talked about The Art of Us by Terry Wilson and Hallmark. But let's just say we talked about The Art of Us by Terry Wilson.
This really was our love letter to Terry, our second love letter to Terry. I hope she listens. We love you.
We do. We love you very much. And if you ever want to have a closed, unrecorded Zoom session with wine and tell us the real deets,
we are dying to know because there's a disconnect.
And I think she was in the movie. Did you see that? I think
she was?
I want to ask her. I think so. I think she was in the gallery during the art show. I think that was her. I took a picture with my phone and I was like, I need to study this later because I think that was her as a little cameo.
Terry, if you were in the art gallery and you're listening to this, please tell us on Twitter.
Give us a shout out. Let us know how tall Steve Lund really is in real life.
Dreamboat, come on.
And if Taylor Cole's eyes are really that pretty,
she's beautiful. That's why it's just, she's so gorgeous, and that's why I was so angry when she did the Ruby Herring Mysteries and they gave her a bad wig.
That wig, I'm like, she has gorgeous hair. I think she's one of those people that I'd be super intimidated to actually make eye contact in real life because I'd be like, I know.
I was just about to say, she doesn't even seem real.
She's from Texas. She's from Arlington, which, yeah.
She's a Texas girl.
So my husband is from Arlington. That's where he was born. So, I mean, it's not like I went and looked and be like, where did she go? Where is she? I do know she's from Arlington. So shout out to us Texas gals.
That's right.
Yeah. I mean, I'm from down south. I'm from San Antonio, but still I lived in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. Arlington's right in the middle. So shout out to the Texas connection there. But all right, we did it. And thank you so much for joining me again. And I want to ask, where can people find you online if they are so inclined?
Oh, you can follow me and my podcast at All the Feels Pod on Twitter. And you can listen to my podcast, All the Feels, wherever you download your podcasts. I have two awesome co-hosts and friends, Erica and Mel. And we would love for you to join us on the Twitter.
Y'all, if you're not listening to their podcast, I don't know what to say because they are delightful.
You are so sweet.
And I'm serious because whenever I have an iPhone and in the morning, it'll pop up new podcasts and I'm like, oh, there's a new All the Feels. Because I listen in the morning when I get ready and I'm like, oh. And then of course when I'm at work, if I don't finish it all. But I was like, there's a new episode. And so you guys have to check them out.
You are so sweet. Thank you. I think you just get excited because they're so rare these days. Episodes are few and far between, but we will be starting back up soon.
Listen, it's hard in these COVID streets to try and get.
It's hard out here, but you know what? We have a lengthy back catalog if you're interested.
Seriously, it's good stuff. So go follow them on Twitter and check out their podcast. And if you want to follow me, I am Lisa Faye CO, Lisa Faye Co. on Twitter and Instagram. And you can follow the podcast on Twitter and Instagram at Which Was Better, or check out our website at whichwasbetter.com. So thank you everybody for listening and the comments and the retweets that you guys give every week. We very much appreciate it. I love the feedback that we get, and I don't know, I just love this community. It's so fun. So thank you. And thank you again, Dory, for stopping by.
Thank you for having me. This was such a treat. I hope I'll be back many times.
You will be back many times, and spoiler alert, we've got some other things in the works, so be on the lookout for that, and we will see you next time. So
bye.